Hello, everybody. Simon Dixon here, and welcome to the third episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk, where we have hard talk about hard money. One of the things that's completely underreported is the story of Bitcoin in India. You see those headlines. Bitcoin is banned. Bitcoin, you can go to prison. And you've seen the headlines. And so what I wanted to do is get a real insider, Sunny Ray, who is the co-founder of Unocoin, which is essentially responsible for bringing Bitcoin to India and continues to go from strength to strength. I wanted Sunny to actually tie up and share his insider perspective on many of the misunderstandings. And what's really great about this is Sunny and the team at Unocoin were not able to share many of these details up until now. And Sunny reached out to me saying that we can now share certain details, and we're able to do that because all these court cases are through. And so this really is instrumental, and Sunny has played a really important role in his team that we talk about in this episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk in allowing Bitcoin to continue in India. So we're going to head over to Sunny Ray, who's also going to share his background and the story of whether Bitcoin is banned, whether it's illegal, and the history of Bitcoin in India. Hello, everybody. Simon Dixon here, and welcome to the third episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk. Today, I've got a very special guest, which is Sunny Ray. In this episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk, where we discuss hard talk about the hardest form of money, I do normally have people that are less, inclined to believe in Bitcoin. But today, I've got a Bitcoin OG, which is somebody I've known for many years and invested in his company, Sunny Ray. He was the co-founder of Unocoin, which were really instrumental in pushing Bitcoin in India. And today the subject is going to be all about Bitcoin in India. So to give a little background before we head over to Sunny, in 2012, 2013, there was all the talk was around, is Bitcoin legal in China? And China used to really have a big say in the price of Bitcoin. One day it was legal, one day they were supporting it. The government actually allowed the very first Bitcoin documentary to appear on government-sponsored TV in China. And this really became somewhat of a joke in the crypto space. China's in, China's out, China's in, China's out. Over the years, really, China has been replaced with India in terms of India's in, India's out. Is it legal? Is it illegal? And what I wanted to do is really get an insider to actually give us the true story of Bitcoin in India, and somebody that has been there from the beginning, and that is Sunny Ray. So Sunny, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Really excited about this.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So actually, I'm going to ask a simple question. Is Bitcoin illegal or legal in India?
Bitcoin is legal in India, and this most recent battle was fought on the grounds of the bank ban. So the central bank issued a notice not allowing banks to deal with cryptocurrency companies. So it wasn't necessarily around legality, it was more around that notice that was sent out.
Okay, so often you see the headlines, and they're always sensationalist headlines. Bitcoin banned in India, India bans Bitcoin, whatever it may be. But often you get a little bit deeper into the detail and you realize that there's either sometimes rumors or it's some official that was speaking not on the capacity of the whole central bank or the whole government. And then it's really dressed up as the entire country banning it. Other things that tend to happen when we've seen this flip-flopping of is Bitcoin illegal, is it not in certain countries, is that really it may be, so in the case of China, it was not, you couldn't operate a cryptocurrency exchange, but there was no problem with people owning Bitcoin. And so really in India, the recent case, and we will go deep into it starting from the beginning, was really that the Indian central bank Now, explain the difference between, is the Indian central bank, is that independent of the Indian government? How close is that relationship? Do you know much about the politics in terms of the central bank and the government?
Okay, so it's definitely part of the government. It's not the government. There are some other conversations, and we can get into it later on in the interview, where an uh, interministerial, so like a committee formed by the government of India from different departments. It's called the IMC. So that was formed as well, and there's been some mixed messages from there. But when so in the course of this court case, it actually came out that the IMC, they'd actually recommended, their initial recommendation was not to ban Bitcoin. It was, in fact, to regulate Bitcoin. So now I'm referring to, again, the committee that was put together by the government. But the RBI, the central bank, is not the government. It's the central
Okay.
bank, and
So
it's
you
a part of
have,
it.
let me make sure that's clear. So you have RBI, which is the Indian central bank, and their
Mhm.
job, like other central banks, is really to regulate the quantity of money in terms of the Indian rupee, financial stability, and do they also is that clear independence between the separation? So often in a country like US, you have Trump arguing for interest rates to go up or down, but the Federal Reserve is an independent organization. Do you see the
Mm.
same type of friction in India where they're arguing, or do you think they're more unified and working to a common goal?
No, I think it's similar to the United States. And again, I don't want to comment on something that I don't have 100% clarity on, but from my understanding, it is similar to the United States, but I do not believe they have the same level of autonomy and independence as the Federal Reserve does in the United States. But I just want one kind of important point that I thought I'd mention. Uh, the RBI was pretty tough. They made it clear early on in the court case that they felt the Supreme Court was out of their jurisdiction and even challenging the RBI. So it was definitely apparent to us that the RBI doesn't like to be challenged. In fact, this was the second time in history, in India's history, that the Supreme Court ever overruled the RBI. So really, it was unprecedented, and yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised by this verdict.
Okay, so you have the RBI, which is the Indian central bank.
Hmm.
They issued a notice to, I guess you'd call them their clients, the banks, banks that have bank accounts with the RBI, and let them know that they're not allowed to deal with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency exchanges. Was really what actually happened. But let's go,
Hmm.
before we go deep into that, because
Yeah.
let's try and go straight, back to the beginning and the early days of Bitcoin in India, because you've been there from the beginning, and Unocoin was, one of, if not the first company in India to try and serve the Indian population to allow them to buy Bitcoin with their Indian rupees. Help us understand, like, what was Bitcoin like
Mm.
in the early days, and how did you first get involved?
Right. Okay. So maybe just by way of background, real quick, for maybe those who don't know, in less than 30 seconds, I'll give my background. So born and raised in Canada to East Indian parents, visited India almost every year growing up, studied electrical engineering, ran my own financial brokerage after I graduated for a couple years in hopes of wanting to learn more about money, but felt more disillusioned at the end of that journey than I did at the beginning, because I just felt like, yeah, it's kind of funny how, even simple questions, when you pose them to people who have all these licenses and fancy suits, they can't answer, like, what is money? And where does it come from? And why do we have inflation? And so these basic kind of questions always gnawed at me. I ended up leaving that space, spent the better part of my career in robotics, spent almost 8 years in robotics. That job essentially took me out across North America, Latin America, and then eventually my CEO one day said, "Hey, go out to India and help us build out our presence there." Moved out to India from Toronto in 2011. Saw what was happening in Toronto with Anthony Diorio and Vitalik, and kind of the Bitcoin scene here in Toronto was really vibrant, and felt that I was missing out. So that got me to start my own Bitcoin meetups in Bangalore, and they were the first Bitcoin meetups in the country. And I always tell that story because that was really kind of the genesis of everything that came to be. And through those meetups, I ended up meeting Satvik and Harish and Abhi, who are co-founders at Unocoin. And really the four of us, when we first met, it was like a match made in heaven. Like we all loved Bitcoin. We didn't know exactly where we would land, but we just knew that this was something that was exciting. And so we started tinkering. We started doing Bitcoin mining operations. And I don't know if you remember physical Bitcoins and, conferences and you name it. That we had an idea, we would try it really with one kind of common denominator, which was a bit of failure, I guess you could say. We couldn't quite find where things would make sense, but we didn't care. We just kept trying. And then everything culminated to, so one day we were just thinking like, we have these awesome meetups, we get people riled up about Bitcoin, but then there's no place to go and safely buy it. There's no platform with like a wallet integrated. There's no KYC. It's a bit of a jungle. And so one day I was talking to, I don't know if you know David, the guy behind Mastercoin, and he kind of asked us the question. He's like, well, have you guys considered, maybe launching something similar to Coinbase or a platform that, addresses the needs? And that was it. And then we just said, okay, let's go at it. So a couple of interesting kind of turn of events that, and again, we're going to get to the RBI part, but when we were going to launch Unocoin in December 2013, we said, hey, what better place to do it than at a conference at the Sheraton? And we invited, everyone that we could think of, but we also invited government officials because we thought, this technology is not going to be, hidden away from the world. It's gonna change the world, and so people who regulate these types of things should also be aware and just be in the know. And so we actually invited people from different government departments, and a lot of people don't know this, but someone from the RBI showed up at that event.
Oh, right.
And
Okay.
yeah. So this is December 2013. So the story really starts back then, and I'll never forget. Without going into too much detail, a week after that event, after Unocoin was launched, there was a notice put on the central bank's website saying, "Look, we believe that Bitcoins are volatile. We believe that there are some concerns around its security." And that was when the dance began. And then I also remember, I think on day 3 or day 4, we had 4 employees and we had 30 people from the tax department, come knocking on our front door, asking, questions and trying to figure out what this Bitcoin thing was about. And I remember after our event, I had flown to Colombia because that's where my wife's from, and I'd seen all this stuff kind of coming up in the news. And I called Satvik and I said, Satvik, this is scary stuff. Like, do we really want to be going up against like, the powers to be here? I mean, Bitcoin's awesome, and Satvik said, Sunny, you're a foreigner, you'll probably figure this thing out. You'll probably start a business elsewhere or maybe join a company. But if I give up on Bitcoin today, my whole country will lose out on it. And so yeah, I think it was, Satvik's kind of Herculean efforts and his initiative, and what really, I think, enabled Bitcoin to be where it's at today. But I wanted to share that, tidbit
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, full disclosure, I should say, we invested in Unocoin in one of their early funding rounds, both at Bank to the Future and as well as Bitcoin Capital, an investment company we created with Max Kaiser. And so I want to make sure people know that as a disclosure. But one of the things that really piqued our interest.
But Simon, on that note, thank you, because it was guys like you and Max and Barry Silbert and the Drapers that kind of bleed orange, if you will. It's because of investors like you, we were able to kind of navigate these really tricky waters and not have people that just freaked out at the first sign of distress. And so yeah, having people that really got it and were patient and willing to help us in times of need was a big deal. So again, one of my objectives was to make sure I thanked Satvik and the guys, but also our investors, because without you guys, it wouldn't have been possible.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. No. Well, one of the things that we really appreciated about Satvik, and I've interviewed him in other things when we're doing investor updates for our investors and stuff. But Satvik is one of those guys, and I think you just shared, there's nothing that's going to make him give up. Like when we share some of the stories that you guys have been through to try and get Bitcoin to where it is today in India. You know, he was just never going to give up. There were times when, you know, we'd already thought that this is through. But to the final, you know, to the final penny, if he'll be there. And if there's one little glimmer of hope, he was still pushing. So I hope we get to share that story, because I don't think the world really knows how instrumental like your team and Unocoin was in actually getting Bitcoin just to where it is today.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Simon, just one quick thing. I'm going to butcher this quote by Peter Thiel, but I read something along the lines of how intelligence is obviously some sort of like, great quality to have, but courage is something that's hard to find. And I think that's something, and the Unocoin team really exhibits that in spades.
Yeah, certainly. And you know, when we were investing in companies like Unocoin, it was not easy to secure investment in those days. You know, this is before the whole world was talking about blockchain and the whole world was, into Bitcoin like it is today. This is just a completely different world when you tell them about investing in a Bitcoin company. There was a very niche audience that were ready to invest in companies like this. Um, so what in those early days then, before Unocoin, how did people in India actually buy Bitcoin? I remember you telling me stories of people like turning up to your meetups with duffel bags full of cash. Obviously, in India, cash is still a very important part of the economy, and also one of the largest populations of gold owners in the world. And gold is a really important asset class in India in terms of people's savings. Before we get to demonetization stage, because that actually came later, how were people actually buying Bitcoin in those early days?
Yeah, like you said, they weren't by and large, but people who were super motivated, they would come to our meetups and say, hey, I've got cash. You guys want to sell us some Bitcoin, or vice versa? And so those meetups really became kind of an organic place for people to meet and connect. And we could have probably have built some sort of platform to facilitate cash to Bitcoin trades. But for us, we felt it was important for one team to really kind of just put on their big boy pants and address the real need, which is, being able to kind of convert your hard-earned rupees from your bank account into Bitcoin. And that simply wasn't possible. I should mention there was one service, just to pay credit where credit is due. There was one service at the time that was available. It had no wallet, it had no KYC. It was a one pager, one web page where you go in, you put in your Bitcoin address, you go to a bank, give them 20,000 rupees cash or whatever it is, and then you would, by the time you were home, you would get the Bitcoin settled to your own wallet. So there was a service like that available at the time. But again, we knew that as exciting as Bitcoin is, we also knew that there are threats that Bitcoin poses. And so, again, having kind of a financial background and looking at models around the world as well, we really identified, hey, we need to solve this problem at scale. How do we build an app? How do we build an Android app or an iOS app where people could, from the comfort of their home, buy Bitcoin? So that was the piece that wasn't there. So cash was available, but in terms of being able to do it with your Paytm or your mobile wallet, that wasn't possible. And that was really kind of the piece that we wanted to solve. And we also knew that if we were going to play nicely with banks, and we needed to do things like KYC and make sure that we knew who we were dealing with. But to answer your initial question, it was mostly cash based. It was very, very crude. It was you could say like a bit of OTC or a bit of just person to peer type of trades happening, but really just kind of on the edges. Super hardcore geeks that were getting into it would be super excited, but really no way to kind of get Bitcoin at scale. And I even remember when we launched Unocoin. At that fancy conference, that the week after that, all of us had gone to Bombay and just celebration of like, the conference is done. And we kind of didn't realize it, but like orders were racking up on Unocoin, and we were like, oh, we'll get to it when we get back. Like, who's going to use this platform? Everything else we've built has been kind of a bit of a failure. And a week later, we were like, oh my God, like there's a lot of people who need this, who want this, and I think literally a couple of weeks after that, it was Barry Silbert had reached out to us because of a CoinDesk article, and it was funny. I'll never forget also is that when Barry wrote us that initial email, I think Satvic had deleted the email because who would want to give money to a Bitcoin business in India? Like, we just didn't even think that that was something that was investable. We were just doing it because we loved Bitcoin and we wanted to solve a problem.
Yeah. And you talk about, yeah, my first Bitcoin was actually a Casasius physical Bitcoin. So it was in the conference in Prague, and I bought a Casasius coin which had 5 Bitcoins on it for $25. Yeah. So these were pretty handy things because I was a finance guy that kind of just met all these geeks and technologists and anarchists that we had a shared vision around us versus the banks, but the technology was really difficult back then. So all of these companies that came along earlier is so much easier today than it was back then. But yeah, so you did the hard part, the securing banking and extremely challenging things for all the companies that we've invested in, getting your first customers, and as you said, within a few weeks, it was starting to show real popularity. I think I'm not sure if we're fast forwarding too much, but then we had this phase in India around demonetization, which is where the largest denominated Indian rupee notes were going to be taken out of circulation. And there were these pictures of people with their bags full of their life savings queuing outside banks, so that I guess the agenda, well, my interpretation of the agenda was to digitize a lot of the larger denominated cash, so that they can try and crack down on some tax avoidance through the cash markets. And therefore, in doing that, they were following the Western model because they were going to get more advanced, banking, then really explode the economy on debt. And demonetization was, for me, a first move in that direction. What's your version of the demonetization story?
Yeah, so just to we just dig a little bit deeper there. So what had happened was two of the larger currency notes one day were essentially taken out of circulation, and so anybody that had those notes in their possession would essentially have to go to the bank, show that they had paid taxes on those on that income, and then they would get issued new notes that were then created. And so yeah, it was something else. Like when I know the topic of this podcast isn't necessarily like what is money. Well, I mean, I guess your overall topic is kind of about that, um, but fungibility is one of those things that kind of make money. And so imagine your grandmother on her deathbed is like, okay, here's all my life savings. Um, well, now if that money that was given to you through your inheritance or whatever, let's say she didn't have receipts for it, but she wasn't some criminal, now all of a sudden all that wealth is not wealth anymore. Okay. What was really scary was just kind of seeing all the lineups at the ATM machines. Like, there were literally hundreds and hundreds of people lined up, and there were cases of people literally dying because they just couldn't get access to their money. And then the final piece that really kind of blew my mind was that the government was actually using fighter jets, Simon, fighter jets, to get cash out to the rural parts of India, right? And so, so what kind of impact did that have on Unocoin? I think our volume, our web traffic, I think tripled or quadrupled within a week or two. So it was definitely the best advertising campaign that we've ever run, or lack thereof. It was, yeah. So it was definitely an interesting time, and for these reasons as well, as we were always hopeful that things would work out for Bitcoin in this court case, but we also knew that the odds were very much stacked up against us.
Yeah. I often say people often ask what is the utility. People try and compare it to gold, and they say, well, the utility of gold is the ability to create jewelry and things like that. but by far and away its store of value. And with Bitcoin, it's the ability to own your own money, the ability to spend your own money without censorship, and then also more recently, people are concerned about money printing. Bitcoin's the opposite. And so, when something like the demonetization events occur, people start to realize that actually, this money that I hold can suddenly be taken out of existence if it's not, digitized in the correct way, or it held in the correct way. And people start to realize the value of Bitcoin based upon these events. So you started to see, during these events, you had a tripling, a quadrupling of people that were asking questions and interested to purchase Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really touch on this, but it might make sense to also just quickly explain why, at least I believe, Bitcoin is almost kind of a perfect match for India. And your viewers might already know this, but just to call out the obvious, number one, biggest gold market in the world, like you said, Bitcoin is digital gold, right? So I think there's this kind of groundwork that's been laid by gold, where people, like, I remember when I first moved to India in 2011, payday came around, you would go to, like, you'd walk outside, and first of all, every 10th store in India is a gold shop. But then on top of that, you notice like lineups outside these banks, even, where people are just converting their rupees to gold. And again, having kind of grown up in Canada, that was really it was just weird. It wasn't something that I was used to. And so but I do think that plays into the Bitcoin narrative really nicely, like you suggested. Second, people talk about remittance, right? People say, hey, Bitcoin someday is gonna disrupt remittance. India is the largest inward remitter in the world, right? $100 billion a year, maybe 10-15% of that money go to these unsaid, remittance companies that where, and the reason I think remittance is such a interesting topic is because how people talk about like foreign aid and governments dumping money on poor countries. I personally don't think that is effective, or nearly as effective as remittance. My father sending money back to his mom because she needs to buy milk. Like, who's gonna know the needs of a family member than the person who's related to them, right? And so if you're able to skim off 15-20% off of that, of the people who need it most, then that, I think, hurts the world. And so we think Bitcoin, and not just think, we know, because it's a one thing, many years ago, 3-4 years ago, we started getting lots and lots of IT professionals coming to us and saying, hey guys, like, I'm using Bitcoin and Unocoin to get my payment from the guy in Silicon Valley, but I got a little problem. When I wake up in the morning, the Bitcoin price sometimes dips a couple percentage, and now I lose, out of the $1,000, maybe I get 900 or 950. Can you guys create an auto sell Bitcoin function where anytime Bitcoin hits that, we just sell it right away and the rupees come into my bank account? We said, yeah, it's easy to do. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, it's a bit more, getting geekier, more technical people that initially came to us saying, hey, look, instead of waiting a week and instead of losing 10-15%, I'm sometimes getting more money in my bank account because of the fact that the price in India is sometimes a little bit higher, and I'm getting it instantaneously. And so remittance is kind of the second piece. The third, I think, is, there are more technical people, more programmers in India, probably second to the United States, if anything. Again, early adopters tend to be people who kind of get programming a bit and can marry that with the gold notion. And we think, again, India is well positioned for that. And the final point I would say is, I think something like 25% of the country or something is under the age of like 20 or 25. It's like there's a huge proportion of very, very young people. And so again, if you kind of bring all those factors together, you start to see that, India's not popping, not going nuts like China was at one point. But if you also know Indian people tend to show up at parties a bit late, right? But when they do show up, they show up in a big way. And I think kind of that's happening with Bitcoin too. I think people are a bit cautious, but I think you're going to start to see in the next few years, especially, a real big uptick.
Yeah, and I did notice that in these niche markets did open up, and I'm not sure whether they opened up in India, but I remember there were these interesting use cases where programmers were getting paid from maybe clients in Silicon Valley, like you said. And then they were converting them to like Amazon gift cards and stuff like that. And they were taking a discount on their Amazon gift cards. And so it created these interesting arbitrage markets where someone could spend their Bitcoin on Amazon, get like a 20% discount because there was some freelancer out there in the world that was wanted to accept their Bitcoin and then spend it through Amazon gift cards. And you had these weird like quasi digital currencies converting into Bitcoin. Were you seeing a lot of that in the Indian? Was
Yeah,
India market?
we were. Remember Purse? You
Yeah,
know
Perth. Yeah.
Purse? So we were Purse's first. I think they were one of our first integrations as well. So that whole game. So you're talking essentially about Purse. Like that's the arbitrage opportunity that they capitalize on, and we partnered with them on that front. And really just to kind of dig a little bit, it's actually Mechanical Turk that kind of creates this arbitrage opportunity. Have you heard of Mechanical Turk?
No.
It's like it's something a part of it. It's something a part of Amazon where let's say you're building some sort of computer software, right? But a part of your software needs a human in the loop. Like you need a human. You can't do it programmatically. You can actually plug in a Mechanical Turk and have somebody, usually from India, kind of come in and perform that. And so people would get paid through Amazon credits, and then they could take those and essentially get Bitcoin for them. And anyway, there's a bit of a kind of a circular loop there, but yeah, that was something. Bitcoin does open up these like kind of edge cases and really exciting and innovative solutions to real life problems. And I find like that's the story that can often gets missed. When we talk about it in this side of the world in North America, is it's all just about speculation and whatnot. But it's like, what about the fact that it's actually helping a lot of people?
Yeah, and I remember one of my really earlier talks in Vietnam. Um, I remember being on a panel, and on the same panel there was representatives from Visa and Mastercard. And this is what I found fascinating, and what I think relates to some of the culture in India. Um, there was a time in this world where banking was an extremely strange proposition. If a company came up to you and said, "Hey, I've got a good idea. Why don't you give me all your gold, or why don't you give me all your money, and I'll just look after it for you?" There must have been a time and place when that was a really hard sell. Be like, "Yeah, right. Why would I give you my money?" And when I was in Vietnam, it felt like the early days of banking, if I was around in those days, how I can imagine it was for banks. Visa and MasterCard were there trying to pitch the banking proposition. Hey, why don't you give me some of your cash and I'll look after it for you? And then we'll lend it out and do stuff for it, and we'll try and get you some interest. And they're like, no, I'd rather keep my cash where I know it is, where I can look after it. And so, where people are struggling to understand Bitcoin at the moment, there was a time and a place when banks were this crazy, edgy innovation, trying to persuade people to take some of their cash that they knew how to hold and then give it to this counterparty to look after it for you and subject you to all of these risks of someone else looking after your money. But nowadays, we just treat that as second nature. In fact, you're weird and probably treated as a criminal just for having cash. Nowadays, if you try and put some of your cash in the bank, you will be treated as if you are a part of a drug cartel or something. But do you still see some of the cultural skepticism around banking still in India, or is it just completely second nature to people to put money at a bank?
Did you hear about Yes Bank? I think they just recently went bankrupt or something. They're one of the big. I remember when we were back in the day, when we were trying to get banking for Bitcoin. That was one of the banks we talked to. And anyway, so there are definitely. So whether you refer to the gold story I mentioned, where people lining up, turning their rupees into gold, or I know I definitely think there's this kind of deep inherent distrust. I don't even know if people can or would articulate it in that way. But I feel like, yeah, people just kind of like get it that, if you go out and buy gold, it's yours and you control it and it doesn't get devalued. And whereas, cash is kind of like just what gets you by like through the week type of thing. So I do think there's definitely distrust for, especially amongst like younger people. I think they're starting to see the light, and there's a lot of, like I said, there are a lot of really smart kind of like programmer types in India, right? And to me, like, I really think one of the things that really helped me kind of really get deep into this was the fact that I'm not a great programmer, but I studied engineering and I could see the ones and zeros in the code and kind of like how beautiful this is. And it's not like someone telling me that this thing works. It really does. And so, whether it's like, the fact that it's gone up, I think when I first heard about it was $10 and today it's like $10,000, whether it's the fact that, it goes up in value because of its like limited nature, whether it's the fact that you can zap it across the world and like remittance, and, whether it's the programmability element or just like open source. I mean, there's just so many, like even today, like as I'm talking about it, I'm getting like shivers, like it's so cool, it's like, so yeah, so I think Bitcoin fits that narrative really nicely. And Satvik, his story was also, he had his own business prior to Bitcoin, before he got into Bitcoin. He was working. Have you heard of Second Life, the virtual world? So he had an incredibly success, and still does. He has on the side. He had a business at the time
The
where
Linden
he was
dollar, was
making
that right?
these, virtual pets. And he would be making Linden dollars, but then in the conversion of Linden dollars to get his rupees, he would lose something like 8 or 10% of his money every month. And so again, when he discovered Bitcoin, it was just like, oh my goodness, like, FX charges and remittance and this and that. And but yeah, so I do think more and more people are starting to recognize kind of the benefits of Bitcoin and the perils of the traditional banking system.
Yeah, when I wrote the book Bank to the Future, there was a whole chapter on these digital currencies, and Bitcoin at the time, when I was writing 2010, 2011, that it was in the same category as some of these Linden dollars. And I remember the Bitcoin to Linden dollar market had just opened up.
Mm.
And you had these virtual worlds where people were living in these virtual worlds, and Bitcoin was you had this Linden dollar currency, but then Bitcoin was convertible into, and it was just taking a real interesting path. And then
Yeah.
we had companies like Mount Gox open and stuff like that, where
And
dollar to Bitcoin.
Simon, you might already know this, but just like 30 seconds. So Satvik's business was he would create these like fox-like virtual creatures that would essentially have the traits of the mom and the dad. So you could take a mom and a dad, pair them together, and have an offspring that had the genetic properties of the mom and the dad. And these little cute animals were free, so you could have one of these. However, if you wanted to keep your little baby alive, you have to feed it, and it would cost $1 a month. And I think when I met him, he had 60,000 of these creatures, that people were using. So the guy was making like 60 grand a month, and probably didn't need to get into Bitcoin, right? But again, it was kind of his vision and him seeing what was happening here that enabled him to get into it.
Yeah, well, thank
Very
thank God
exciting.
he did. And
Yeah.
so, all right, so we've gone from this meetup group of people meeting up with duffel bags of Indian rupees, a duffel bag, sorry, of Indian rupees, and trying to buy some bitcoins, physical bitcoins. Then that leads to the launch of Unocoin, and then suddenly you have these events like demonetization events that kind of help people remember why it's a good idea to still remain skeptical of banking. And then that leads to the tripling, quadrupling of the number of customers. We and some other investors in the crypto space started investing. Then we started to get these first signs of governments, central banks, ministers, non-governmental organizations trying to have an opinion about Bitcoin. So take us to the beginning of when did Bitcoin become important enough for some of these more, politically minded or financial stability minded organizations to actually take notice?
Yeah. So the reason it's a bit confusing is because, yeah, there's almost like two things happening simultaneously. There's this, And by the way, they both kind of dovetail in this court case. And by the way, there's like I think 180-page report. I know most people probably don't have the time to read it, but if you're interested in this, I would highly suggest that people read that report that was put out by the judges, because it goes into grave detail about every element of this. And for those others in other parts of the world that are maybe facing similar challenges, I think there's a lot to learn from the Indian case. And by the way, the Indian case and our lawyers learned a lot from what was happening outside of India as well. And so, but just to rewind, so that, remember in December 2013, I told you about this notice that was put on the RBI website, December 2013, that's 7 whatever years ago. That notice essentially reappeared. So anytime things would kind of, you were saying, oh, is it banned, unbanned, banned, unbanned? I mean, really the only thing that happened from 2013 to 2017 was that notice got reposted in slightly different, verbiage, a couple times over. And then finally, and I don't remember the name of the politician, but it was around 2017 when there was specifically one politician who started really throwing up a bit of, hoopla on Twitter, and it started getting a little bit more interesting. And that's when the IMC was put together. IMC is the committee where you had like different people from different departments. That committee, and again, by the way, we didn't even know this, but we found this out in the course of this court case. But again, I think I mentioned this already earlier in the call, but that IMC, essentially, their first recommendation was that Bitcoin not be banned and that Bitcoin be regulated. And in fact, they later switched that narrative into now talking about potentially banning Bitcoin. And that was one of the things that kind of got brought up in the court case. Okay, but just to kind of dig a little bit deeper. So in terms of like what actually ended up happening, so the RBI, so you probably remember December in 2017, things were going crazy, right? In terms of like Bitcoin was doing really well. At our peak, I think we were onboarding 10, maybe 15,000 users a day, Simon. The company was doing well financially speaking. We had about 150 employees at our peak and about 1.2, 1.3 million customers. But then, if you also recall, there were a lot of scams that were happening in Bitcoin, right? Remember Ruja from Unocoin, your buddy? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, it was like really scammy, and I'm pretty sure some people in India got arrested. There was also some people within the Indian community that were just literally straight up running cloud mining scams as well, and so we believe that
there were these huge, rewinding to 2017 for those that weren't around. Bitcoin, and historically, Bitcoin always enters into bubble phases and corrections. It's just the nature of the beast, new people trying to figure it out. And in 2017, we had an almighty Bitcoin bubble. It went from, I think it was at the beginning of the year, it was under $1,000 and went to $20,000, I believe. I can't remember the exact dates. But with that, the difference was this time is that there were all of these other things coming along that were copying the Bitcoin code, pretending to be Bitcoin killers. And then the confusion of the market was that, there were these outright scammers. So there's different levels here. You've got Bitcoin, which is looking to be sound money. And then you've got all these different use cases that are trying to build alternative things. And then you have, which are more like, you had all these people creating tokens, which were more like stocks almost. And everyone was speculating on all these things. And the market was headed towards, a multi-billion-dollar market at this stage. And then we had these outright scammers, which were just literally pretending to create something that didn't even exist. And the most famous one of that was Unocoin by Dr. Ruja. And Unocoin, if you really want to dig into this story, the BBC did a really great expose on the story. But it's highly likely that this was connected to mafia and all sorts of stuff in Bulgaria, and it still exists today. Can you believe it? That's the level of connection. So you can trace this thing back to it only existed because certain governments were protecting certain mafia interests. And you can trace this all the way back. It's a fascinating story. But yeah, the problem was that people were using the money that was made in Bitcoin. You know, in 10 years, it produced a 9 million% return, highest performing asset class for 10 of the last 12 years. And people were using that confusion to say, here's the next Bitcoin. And all of these people were just jumping on board, doing mining that didn't exist, buying these tokens and coins that didn't exist. And literally just billions was being scammed out of innocent people. And so, you know, we were very concerned as the Bitcoin industry around how this would tarnish Bitcoin's reputation. And so now, 2017, what happened in India?
Okay, so I want to mention one thing. So there's this kind of like emergence of super scammy entities, and then you also had like we went from there were literally like 3 Bitcoin companies forever, and then all of a sudden it went to 30, and in hopes of taking market share, maybe in thinking that they have nothing to lose, a lot of these newer companies, I'll say it, they were straight up cowboys. Okay, and we test our competitors' services, obviously, right? And we would send in pictures of mountains, and they would get approved, right? So there was no semblance. And I know Unocoin has a bit of a reputation on, our KYC sometimes a bit more stringent, if you will, than our competitors, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that one of the things that we might not be the biggest cowboys, but for us, doing things right and doing things for the long term is kind of paramount. But others who were just in it, to win it, they came in and took major risks that we think also compounded some of the concerns that the government officials had. And so, in not being able to parse kind of the reality from the good from the bad, and yeah, we feel like that was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and the RBI decided that they would one day just not allow banks. And so that notice that I mentioned that kept creeping up eventually took a form on their website that literally prohibited all the banks in India to work with crypto companies. And I should mention one thing, and again, I've been kind of all over the world. I have a really diverse kind of set of experiences in dealing with banks. And, whereas banks around the world are very hostile towards Bitcoin, in India, at least Unocoin's experience wasn't that we were facing hostility with our banks. In fact, because Satvik and Harish have been business owners for so long and have really good relationships with their banks, our banking relations have been stellar. It's the central bank in India that really, wasn't a big fan of our work. And so that's why most of our challenges showed up there. So that bank notice came out, that was obviously devastating because we weren't, as an exchange, that's our lifeblood, right? To be able to convert, rupees to Bitcoin. And so that was, it was devastating. And maybe I'll turn it over to you before we get into the real heart of the story here.
Yeah, I will comment on that. I do remember those days. They were very tough because, even a Bank to the Future, there was this huge growth industry. Everyone in the world was onboarding into crypto. None of our companies could keep up. Some of our portfolio companies had a backlog of 40,000 support tickets, 30,000 support tickets. Our industry was completely ill prepared for this. And it was a very interesting time. The amount of money that was flowing into this industry, it was very dicey. And then you got companies that were just trying to do things by the book. At Bank to the Future, we have to comply with securities laws, anti-money laundering laws, and you get a real competitive disadvantage because there was innovations like the DAO that would come along and just say, oh yeah, there's no KYC, these things aren't securities, you can invest just by sending money, like sending an email. And then we're trying to compete with these things where we're trying to follow the book. But it all came in circles because those that weren't following by the rules got slapped eventually and that's what, kicked off the bear market, as it were, that then took several years to recover. But at this stage, so you're on this huge growth path. You're onboarding all of the companies or the people in India that want to buy Bitcoin. And then suddenly RBI put up this notice saying no bank is able to deal with a cryptocurrency exchange. What happened? Did you just instantly get
So,
a
mm,
notice and you were told you've got to
uh,
withdraw this money? What?
yeah, we had like, I think it was maybe 2 months or 3 months that we had to make all that happen. But after that went into effect, it wasn't that our bank account was closed. It was that we just simply were not allowed to transact between our customers and ourselves, and they made sure of it. So for those people wondering if banks have that technology, they definitely do. And so yeah, and so that was okay. So my initial reaction, again, keep in mind, so there was obviously kind of the element around us taking and challenging this notice and taking it to the courts. Initially, it was at the High Court, and then it got elevated to the Supreme Court. And then the court said, "Look, there's just so many of these cases now popping up. Let's just bring them all together and deal with it as one case." So in the face of this, bank ban, if you will, as an engineer, as an entrepreneur, like my initial reaction was to say, okay, let's look at, kind of like first principles. Let's think about this, and then let's go, okay, well, does Bitcoin even need banks to operate? Well, the answer is no. Okay, we have 1 million some customers. Okay, they want to get Bitcoin. Okay, well, is there a way that we can make this happen? So the first thing was P2P, right? Like, why don't we just build a P2P platform so that people don't need to deal with a centralized exchange, and they can just deal with one another, and we can offer, some sort of comfort because we've done KYC on both parties. We can offer some sort of escrow service. And so to me, between, my guys and us, like I probably had 100 messages where I was like, guys, let's do this. But we never decided to go in that direction because, again, we have the best lawyers in the country as a part of our shareholders. And if Nishit says, guys, that's risky, that's in violation of the bank ban, and it could get you guys in trouble long term, we don't do it. And so Satvik and Harish stuck to their guns and said, no, we're not going to do something that we believe is in the face of this. It kind of is wrong. And so some of our competitors, I won't name them, but they did go in that direction. And not only did they do P2P, they also did an ICO, which we think there are, potentially concerns around that. With a name like Unocoin, I've known Vitalik and Ethereum since before they even thought of Ethereum and all that. And so it's not like we don't know how to whip up an ICO token. It takes like 10 minutes. Like even someone stupid like me can do it. It's just, again, we didn't feel that taking money from, everybody for a speculative business was really morally correct in the long run. And so anyways, so P2P, we threw that out the window. But we said we thought about this and we came up with a master plan of essentially, are you ready for this? Launching 300 ATM machines across, and I should call them Bitcoin tellers or kiosks because that's like the right term. But in effect, I mean, these were the actual machines that the banks use. I'm not talking about the Bitcoin ATM machines that you hear about. We actually decided that we were going to go buy the same machines that the banks use. Why? Because we didn't want to have any regulatory concerns. We didn't want to have to realize that, there's some element that was approved and now we don't have access to it. And so we had put one machine in a bank, in a mall, in a tiny, tiny mall in Bangalore. And Simon, when I say that, so some random person, so we hadn't even launched the machine. It was 2 weeks away from deployment. It was our first machine. We were just testing, tinkering, thinking, okay, we're going to keep fighting in the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, we're going to help our 1.5 million customers by deploying machines everywhere. We get our first machine in a mall. Some random person takes a picture of it. It goes viral, like hardcore viral on the internet. Like, as in, I've never seen anything go so viral in my life like this. The news cycle picks it up. I think like 20 or 30 reporters swarm the mall owner's office and like, what is going on? Is this allowed? Blah, 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 legal, illegal. And because of all the confusion and the court case and everything, one thing led to another. And the police eventually decided that, something doesn't look right here. We're going to just take their machines. And they came and literally took our machine. Which is bad, but not as bad as what they did after that. They decided that they would also take Satvik and Harish from their homes as well. And they were, taken away for, I think, a day or two before they were let go, because they had no reason to hold them. Not only were we not doing anything wrong, the machine wasn't even operational. Like, how could we have frauded anyone or done anything? It's just like, literally, it was a machine. And so they were let out. But it was a really, really like hard kind of like, trying time for the company, because, here we are in court, we're not able to do banking services. We can't, even do things that we know are allowed to be done because of all the confusion and hysteria. And so, yeah, it was like just a really, really, tough time. In fact, at that time, we had to, maybe about a year and a half ago, we had to lay off almost 100 employees. I mean, tears. I mean, it was bad, Simon. It was really bad, and it was super sad to kind of go through that experience. On a personal note, two of us co-founders decided that, while we're fighting this in court, we're not lawyers. So, what are we to do? And I'll also kind of admit that I did not think we were gonna win. I don't know if I think I'm allowed to share this. So, you know what the Freedom of Information Act is, right? In the United States, like where you can, so there's something like that in India, and we had used that to get some information from the RBI, and it essentially pointed to the notion that the RBI was essentially trying to choke out the industry and, get rid of it or something like that. And so when you're a scrappy startup with limited funds, and you're going up against the entity that prints the money, and you're getting word that they're not gonna, they're not playing fair, and you're, so anyways, long story short, I had taken a bit of a detour over the last year. Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, essentially gave me a dream job in the form of the head of BD, and I worked at Kraken for the last year. But anyways, yeah, just to go back to the court case, I'll turn it back.
Let's take a step back, because I do remember those. You probably remember the first Bitcoin ATM, Canada RoboCoin. Do you remember that one?
Of course, I know those guys.
There was a photo of this RoboCoin thing, and there was just queues and queues of
BitAccess. BitAccess is the one you're thinking about. They're the Canadian company. RoboCoin, I know that guy too, but that was out of Texas. But yeah, but they're around the same time.
That was in. But I thought, no, the cafe that first put a RoboCoin ATM, I seem to remember it being in Canada.
Actually, it was my friend Antoine. I'm pretty sure. It was called Snakes and Lattes. That was the second one. The first ever machine, I heard in Vancouver. I lost count. I heard in Vancouver. Anyway, I know Canada's got a lot. Yeah. I don't remember exactly, but I know BitAccess was a Canadian company that was producing a lot. In fact, Anthony Diorio had one of their machines. But yeah. But anyways, you were saying.
So right, you reach this phase where you've getting there's these notices on the RBI's website. You decide to build this ATM network. You decide to carry on supporting Bitcoin in India. It ends with Satvik getting arrested, and we enter this, and then you find yourself in a position where you're trying to outspend in court the central bank that actually is in charge of creating all Indian rupees for the country. But how, walk us through what is this? So you decided to actually, is it suing the RBI? Is that the right term? What's the right term here of what you did?
I don't think suing is the right term, because then that would insinuate we probably got some money at the end of it. No, we just essentially made the claim that this bank ban was unconstitutional. That was our main claim. And I'll get to kind of like why that false arrest was relevant, and I'll explain that in a little bit here. But I remember almost 6 months or 8 months after this whole incident with, Satvik being taken away, I was talking to Satvik, and I was like, Satvik, now the dust is settled, like maybe I could ask you some questions. Like, what was that like? That must have been scary. It must have been, like talk me through it. And he was like, Sonny, you know what? It wasn't actually that bad. He's like, the bed was super comfortable. The food was, he's like, the food was yummy. The people in there are really nice. I was like, who is this guy? Like,
Yeah, he's
um,
always, the cup is always half full.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
the arrest. So how did that play? The wrongful arrest. What? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so so the wrongful arrest had happened. At that time, we decided that even though we could go move forward with the ATM machine, we just thought it was too much risk. The company wasn't in a financial position to kind of make that bet either. And so, like I said, two of us co-founders decided to engage with other projects. Satvik and Harish kept fighting in court. And so now to get to the court case. So a couple things I want to mention. Maybe I'll go backwards here a bit. But one of the most important reasons that we believe this court case was won was because at the end, and again, I'm kind of going backwards, so I'll talk about kind of the verdict and all the different points. But I wanted to mention this, which was that in the kind of the end of this entire court case, or near the end, the three judges came to the lawyers and said, okay, well, okay, you guys are claiming that this bank ban was unconstitutional. However, when we look at you guys, this is an association. It was actually the IAMAI that fought this battle. I'm going to mess it up. I think it's the India's, Internet and Mobile Association of India. Ooh, got it. So they were the entity that fought this, and they were the kind of the face of it. So like, well, that's an association. There's no constitutional rights for the association because the Constitution applies to people, individuals. And then behind the association, you have all these companies like Unocoin and others. So where is the constitutional violation? And in fact, it was literally that story that I just brought up, the wrongful arrest of Harish, and really the damage that our business took, and the livelihoods that were impacted. That was really one of the central points that came up. And Harish was not only in the court every single day. It was really his story that kind of came to light. Hey Simon, do you want me to? Are you picking up some of that background noise? Should I just ask them to be quiet?
It's actually good. I can't hear it. So
Oh, okay. Oh, cool.
yeah.
My kids are screaming at the top of their lungs. This is great. Boast. Okay, so that was number one. And the number two piece that again that I think a lot of people overlook is that the lion's share of this court case, I think 85%, 90% of the legal funds were provided by Unocoin. And I know there are a lot of companies out there that are trying to take some of this credit, but I think the world should know that, it was really like, again, guys like you that invested in us, and guys like Satvik and Harish that did all this, that really enabled this to happen. And then last but not least, and I would say probably most importantly, our clients. Like if we didn't have 1 million plus users supporting Unocoin since December 2013, buying, selling, enabling us to generate revenue, like we could never have done this. So one of my main points also I wanted to get across was that I'm really thankful to all the Unocoin customers, and really just kind of the journey that they've allowed us to embark upon. But yeah, so that was important. I felt, in terms of like that arrest or false arrest kind of played an important part in this victory.
Amazing. So, I do remember the headlines when Sutcliffe got arrested. It was a crazy time. And how long was that time between the arrest and actually getting the successful court win?
Oh, it was some time. It was at least a year, I want to say, maybe a year and 3 months or something like that. Yeah. And do you mind, Simon? Do you want me to maybe share a bit about just maybe some of the highlights from the court case?
Yeah,
I
go
think
for
your
it.
listeners might be okay. I'll just rip through it, and if there's anything interesting, I can go deeper. But this was 5 kind of major, kind of really important points. One thing that's important is that for this court case, there was extensive international benchmarking done. Probably never seen before like this in India, at least from the Bitcoin world. And so whether it be the lawyers on our side, judges, I mean, it was, if you go through that 200-page report, you'll see that there was a lot, whether it be FATF or, I mean, CFTC or you name it, like they looked at almost every major regulating body. And that was something that is important. Number two, I wanted to mention is that one of the main reasons that the judges ruled in our favor is because there was essentially a lack of empirical evidence. The central bank was trying to prove that, Bitcoin, has all these negative kind of elements to it. None of that. So the judges required that they actually prove this with some sort of evidence. That evidence simply wasn't there. Number three, no alternatives were considered. So when the bank ban came in place, they just decided to introduce it. They didn't introduce a regulatory framework or something else, that was a potential option before jumping to this bank ban. That was another very, very important point that the judges looked at. Number four, the government's position was inconsistent. So as I mentioned, the IMC, the Inter-Ministerial Committee, came together, and their first kind of suggestion to the government was, we should not ban this thing, we should regulate it, and that's that. But then that same committee came out later and had the polar opposite. If you remember all that hoopla about, Indian government's trying to ban Bitcoin now, and even if you talk about it or something, you go to jail. That's the same committee that initially said we should regulate it. So the fact that they changed their position was not okay. And then the fifth point that I wanted to mention is that, looking forward, we believe that bank bans are highly unlikely in India, and there needs to be a heavy burden of proof, and mainly because banks serve as a lifeline for businesses. And so in India, you have the fundamental right, as per the Indian Constitution, to practice any trade, as long as it's not illegal. And so in the absence of Bitcoin being illegal, there's no reason to come down on Bitcoin businesses the way they did. And the last point I'll mention is that the actions that the central bank took were deemed to be not proportional to the threat that it posed. Anyway, so those are some of the more kind of legal, technical kind of matters. I know they're less exciting or interesting, but again, for others, I know we're getting a lot of people reaching out to us saying, hey, we're facing similar things in our country. How can we maybe leverage some of the work you guys did? So that's one. And then, I'll turn it over to you. But there was a few more things I want to mention in terms of red flags looking into the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, these are all really, really important points because, Bitcoin Hard Talk episode 1 was an interview with Jim Rogers, and his whole argument was that, Bitcoin, it's not a question of, the original argument is, will Bitcoin succeed? Well, that argument is lost. Bitcoin has succeeded, but it can be so successful that he believes it will go to zero just because governments hold guns. And so now we have a framework with the work that Unocoin did and funded, around what happens, what are the important considerations if a government or a central bank or some other type of entity, because we often conflate all these different entities into one thing called the government, but often you can see that there's different forces at work here, there's different interests. But now we have a court case and a framework for actually how to react if governments do this. And there's kind of two schools of thoughts around which governments will do this. Well, it's the governments that have the most to lose, which is the strongest currencies in the world, the dollar, the euro, these major economies. But then you've got countries where their currencies are being destroyed, like Venezuela and Argentina, and they're trying to hold on to power and keep people in those currencies that are hyperinflating away, and see Bitcoin as a threat. But in both of those, there's an opportunity. There's the opportunity to rebalance power by the government embracing a Bitcoin policy. And the larger ones that have got the most to lose, they seem to be putting together the regulatory structures to try and essentially capture the data through centralized exchanges and things like that. And if you give that to another country, then all the data goes to that other country and you lose competitive advantage. This is why it was kind of crazy stopping Facebook launching their cryptocurrency Libra, because it gives the governments a backdoor, which they have, as we know from the Snowden revelations, to what could potentially be this ginormous global currency. And also, interestingly, the Facebook cryptocurrency, the test pilot was set to be launched in India through WhatsApp, right? I believe.
Yeah.
India seems to be tying into all these interesting stories. So I think it's hugely important seeing that framework exists, and one country deciding to try and or one entity try and implement a ban tends to open up these competitive forces. There is rule of court, and the Unocoin team have actually proved that you can argue these human rights, these unconstitutional arguments, to actually still win cases. So, what are the other important things that you thought we need to cover there?
Yeah, just a couple things. These are more, I guess you could call it. And by the way, I'm for people who want kind of like a Coles Notes or TLDR of some of these court findings. There's this lady named Tanvi, Tanvi. You can maybe just Google Tanvi and Bitcoin or something like that, or I can even maybe share the link with you. You could put it in your YouTube kind of comment section or whatever. But there's this lady named Tanvi who does a great job of summarizing. She's like an engineer, plus she's like a policy analyst, and she just puts it really nicely and kind of explains what's really happening, and she does a great job of it. So a couple things. So red flag. So it's important to note that this whatever just happened in India, this does not restrict legislative or parliamentary action. So those people who are like, hey, we won, like, yay, Bitcoin, yeah, we won the battle, but there's still kind of this like war going on, and it's not over yet. And so that's important, right? And so what that means is, and there is verbiage in this court case that kind of alludes to the fact that if legislations deem Bitcoin to be illegal, then the bank ban can obviously take full effect again. But again, to make those types of changes obviously takes a lot of time, and we don't think this will happen. But again, it's important to not just kind of sit back and hope that things don't happen, right? It's important to be active. Number two, verdict hinges on crypto being legal. That kind of plays into that other point I just mentioned. The next point is crypto. This is an important one. Unfortunately, the judges did not see that Bitcoin and blockchain are one and the same. So there is this narrative in India where we're going to build the rupee on the blockchain, and it'll have nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? Or that Bitcoin and blockchain are somehow two different types of technologies, and you can kind of tease out the blockchain element and forget the Bitcoin currency element. And we think that's wrong. We don't think that's true. We don't think you can just tease out the blockchain from Bitcoin. And so that is an area where we think more education needs to happen. People out there that are doing YouTube channels, whatever it is, like we need to educate, not just people on the internet, but really the policymakers and regulators. Number four, the verdict does not consider monetary threat. So one thing that this court case did not cover is the fact that it did not look deeply into this kind of concern around, does Bitcoin pose some sort of monetary threat? That was not. So it was more just the constitutional element that was really explored. And then the last point I'll kind of bring up here is that this notice that was overturned applies to companies. So users are not protected by this verdict. And so again, we don't think that the banks are going to come after every single user, but it should be noted that users are technically not protected by this verdict. And so, like I said, I think those points, those red flags, point towards where we need to be going as a community. And as I mentioned, Unocoin did a lot of the legwork in terms of funding this legal framework and all that. But looking forward, like if people in India really want Bitcoin to succeed, it's about them stepping up and kind of, contributing and helping out, and not just tweeting about it or, raising funds on the notion that they somehow did something. But there are a lot of players coming into the space that are trying to take some of the shine, which is fine. But when it comes down to digging deep and digging into the trenches and getting some of that dirty work done, we encourage some of these newer players to get involved.
Okay, I think this is naturally coming to its conclusion. It's been really fascinating, and I'm glad that we get to, bring out this story, because I don't think people know like many of the characters and some of the events that led up to where we are today. So why don't we end with a little summary on where we think India is, and let's focus on Bitcoin and the central bank digital currency. What's the deal where we are today?
Okay, so where are we with respect to Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is trading again, banks. So we had our banker come to Satvik's house on the Saturday after this verdict happened to get our bank account, going. So there's no concerns around that. Yeah, and so companies, there are other companies now starting to come back in India as well, and so we're really excited that Bitcoin in general is happening. Um, on the CBDC front, we haven't been very involved on that front. Yeah, but know that we're exploring some opportunities there as well, and yeah, and just given kind of our global network, and we think there's an opportunity to do that. Yeah, I don't want to say too much. I've got some really exciting things I want to say, but we as a just general policy, we don't talk about things that are in the future. We just talk about things that we've done in the past, just
Okay,
competitive
we'll leave
purposes.
that for the next chapter, Sunny. We'd love to have you back, and we can discuss what the world looked like when the Indian central bank launched their central bank digital currency, and what story that actually tells after getting over this health crisis, and what looks like, the world moving into a recessive, depressive environment. Hopefully, Bitcoin can provide some glimmer of hope in this interesting time that we're approaching. So, Sonny, I know you always like to end on a positive note. You're definitely, I think, one of the reasons why Unocoin got this far is because yourself and Satvik always see what the opportunity is and what the positive is. So, how would you like to leave everybody watching this in terms of what you think is they should know?
So growing up, when I said I used to visit India. There's this one company that is iconic in India. It's called Tata. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but Ratan Tata is one of the richest people in the world. I think he's amongst the top 10. Everything, like from the car to the trucks to lorries to the butter. I mean, you see Tata everywhere. And I think last week Tata just announced that they are launching a cryptocurrency offering for all the banks. Um, so to me, that is a sign that things are moving in the right direction. It's no longer potentially, Unocoin, it's like David and Goliath. Like we're starting to see industry, and that's just one thing that I can mention that's public and out there. But to me, it's starting to show that. And again, there are lots of big companies in India that are reaching out to us now, that are wanting to, work with us, and so super pumped about that. Just on a personal note, Simon, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for all the work that you've been doing, not just investing, but the YouTube videos and a lot of your thought pieces that you've been putting out lately. They've really been resonating and helping. And that's actually inspired me as well to start creating more content. And so on my website, sunnyray.com, I'm going to be releasing, more YouTube videos on these types of things that are happening in India. I've just shared like just kind of the one overarching story on Unocoin, but there are hundreds of stories that people just don't know about, partially because we weren't in a position to share them or whatever. And so I'm going to be I'm going to try to do a better job of trying to create content specifically for people that are business owners in the Bitcoin space that are struggling with banking and raising financing and product market fit and all these things. And I know there's a lot of there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I want to start creating, like I said, content that speaks specifically to these types of challenges. And so, yeah, sunnyray.com, if anyone wants to, check it out, that's where I'm going to be posting stuff.
Awesome. Look forward to seeing more of those stories. Thank you very much for sharing this almost, I guess, 7 years approaching a decade in crypto in India, and we look forward to seeing what the next decade looks like. So,
and Simon, just one last thing. So Unocoin.com is obviously the place where people can go to buy and sell Bitcoin. And then there's also what some people might not be aware of is we released something called UnoDAX. So that's UnoDAX.com. That's a full-blown order book exchange with over 50 crypto assets on there. And then we have something called Unoversity.com, which is portal for people to learn more about crypto. Cool. Yeah, but those are all the things.
Awesome.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that, Sonny. And that's going to do it for this episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 3, where we learned the true story of Bitcoin in India. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk. We're excited about bringing more in the future, and we've got a really exciting lineup. But I'd actually really like to hear who you'd like to see me talk with on Bitcoin Hard Talk. So why don't you tweet me and the person that you think should be on the show? You can tweet me at Simon Dixon Twit, and also tweet the person that you think should be on the show and why they should be on it. Also, subscribe to this channel. It's Simon Dixon on YouTube. If you hit the bell symbol, then YouTube will give you notifications every time we go live with another episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk, plus my live AMAs and other updates as we watch the whole financial system unfold. And remember, no matter how bad it gets, you are alive at one of the most exciting times in financial history. And I want to make sure that you're on the right side of that curve. Peace.